Hello and welcome to another instalment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden, and Etches Adokru. Today, I'm very pleased to say we are joined by Connor Bromley. Connor works for the Daily Mail and is host of one of their
Oh, Daily
podcasts,
Mirror.
Daily Mirror.
I'm not
Sorry.
having Daily Mail. You'll have to restart that
I
one.
actually wrote
Cracking
Daily
start to the
Mirror.
podcast.
I
Cracking
actually
start.
wrote Daily Mirror.
I would let you off with pretty much any other newspaper. The Daily Mail and the Sun are the two that I would have to call you up on. You could have said any other one, not the Mail. Do you know what it is? Maybe just continue. I think this is a better introduction.
Oh
I
no,
think
I
you should
am.
just go on.
I
Yeah.
am. I don't mind you calling out the Mail and the Sun, mate. So,
Yeah. I'll just be calling out your nonsense all day. Just like, no, you're wrong there. You're wrong there.
so I'm definitely not pausing it. Yeah, and is host of the Mirror's Football Digest podcast. Connor is formerly of the Roker Report and Roker Report podcast, and is joining us today to discuss Sunderland's turnaround under new owner Kyril Louis-Dreyfus, Sunderland's summer transfer business, the season so far on the pitch, and we'll discuss what the future holds for the mighty Black Cats. So, Connor, after what was quite a treacherous intro, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
And well, you forgot I worked for Sunderland as well. That was something that maybe
No,
could have
no,
went
no.
in your.
We were coming up to that. That's a
Oh,
big
you're coming up
question.
with that. Oh,
That's a
okay.
big question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I've jumped the gun on that one there. No, I'm well. I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to talking about Sunderland because to be honest, I don't get to talk about Sunderland that much anymore. I mean, the people at the Daily Mirror do not want to talk about League One clubs. Generally, I'm stuck on the big six.
Snobbish.
Yeah, a little bit on Newcastle this past week, which hasn't been fun. But yeah,
Mm.
other than that, all good.
Yeah, I have to say, me and Richard have been running this podcast for probably 18 months, going on that. This is the first episode we've done on the mighty Black Cats because there hasn't been much to talk about, has there? As you can, well, there's been a lot to talk about, but not much to shout about. And for those neutral listeners, it would have been pretty dull. But today is the day that we're finally rolling out the Sunderland episode for Wyfutbol.
He's playing it down. He is absolutely ecstatic to do a podcast, an episode on Sunderland. So when we started, we were thinking about doing one for a really long time, and he's been waiting for this one. The prep, everything. This is Dryden's time. Because obviously Sunderland are doing really, really well, or better than they have done previously. And yeah, I'm glad this episode has finally come to the fore because it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, you can get out of the way now, Etche. You can just be like, right, we've done Sunderland. We can't do them again until they do something significant. Because to be honest, while the season has started reasonably well, I still wouldn't say it is all that significant. We did lose 4-0 in our last league game. So all is not
Mm,
particularly rosy.
mm.
Well, pretty rosy, but not as rosy as it could be.
I'd say still, well, compared to recent seasons, been pretty rosy. I was at Fratton Park last Saturday, and I can tell you it wasn't rosy then. It was absolutely pissing it down for basically the whole day, and then lost 4-0. So you mentioned it, Connor, before about Newcastle. I have to start with that because it pains me to do so. Even on our first Sunderland pod, I start off talking about Newcastle United. But I really want to gauge your opinion as another Sunderland fan, what your feelings are of the takeover.
Oof. I read a very interesting article on True Faith, which is the Newcastle fanzine. I don't particularly rate that fanzine, but this article was particularly good. And I think it kind of summed up my feelings um, as well as it could, because I think if this had happened to Sunderland and Sunderland were in the Premier League and got this takeover, I couldn't stop supporting Sunderland. I mean, I've supported Sunderland. I've seen them get relegated at home against Burton Albion. I've seen the League One days and the disasters that they've been of, losing at home to Burton Albion and God knows what else. It's been terrible. But even through all that, I haven't stopped supporting Sunderland, no matter how bad it's been. And while I really think the Premier League should really consider whether or not they should allow people from the Saudi Arabian government to essentially own the club,
Mm,
and essentially the Saudi Arabian state to own Newcastle. The Premier League should not allow that to happen. However, when they allowed Manchester City to get bought by the Abu Dhabi group, the
mm,
floodgates would open on this kind of thing. And I don't think Newcastle fans should be vilified for being excited about this takeover. I do think, though, that there is massive moral questions. Can Newcastle take part in the Rainbow Laces campaign? Can Newcastle United
mm,
take the knee? Can somebody from the LGBT community go to a Newcastle United game now? Because I've one of my closest friends is gay, and he says he's in a massive conundrum for that, because
Yeah.
how can you knowingly step foot inside St James's Park when the people who own that club believe that you should literally be stoned to death? That is a
Yeah.
massive moral question. And I don't really envy Newcastle fans on that. And the other thing as well is, when the Saudi Arabian government inevitably kills another journalist or has another flat out PR disaster on the world stage, that kind of falls at Newcastle United's door now. No matter what they do on the pitch, there's always going to be this hanging over them. And they're always also going to have an asterisk over their name that they are owned by the people they are owned by, and any success they have will be tainted by that. You've also got on the flip side of that, being a Sunderland fan, I'm actually comfortable with, in a similar way, Newcastle, comfortable with kind of what we are. You know, we are not a big six club. We are not Manchester United or Arsenal or Liverpool or Chelsea. You know, we're a team that if it achieves that level of success, it does it through hard work, through good work on the recruitment and good work in your academy. I think by ultimately buying success, you lose a lot of what these football clubs are in a lot of ways. So there's many things to unpack with it. I don't begrudge a Newcastle fan getting excited about it though, and I don't begrudge them turning a blind eye to topics that maybe you shouldn't turn a blind eye to. It's difficult. It's
Yeah,
really difficult to assess.
Yeah, because a lot of fans have been calling for any takeover because obviously the hatred of Ashley, and for a lot of fans, I think they got overly excited and began to believe it was going to be that mega multi-billionaire takeover that would lead them to success. And I think a lot of them probably have got drunk on success, which isn't necessarily the right thing for them to do. I mean, HS is an Arsenal fan, so could probably give like the other side of the take in a sense. But I kind of agree with you in that. I remember going to even when I was like 16, went to Old Trafford. You remember, I think we drew 2-2. Cameron Jones scored, and then
Oh, we got robbed. Kieran Richardson got sent off.
Kieran Richardson got sent off. And I remember after the game, as a 16-year-old, truly believing that he got sent off on purpose because he didn't want to play the next game and he wanted to go on holiday. I was 16, but then they equalised in the last minute, and I thought it was all one big conspiracy. But I remember like leaving the game then and thinking, you know what, like for a United fan, they win every game. They'll be turning to that game thinking we should beat Sunderland. Losing that game for them would have been, or even drawing, would have been so cataclysmic, and the victory would have meant very little. I know there's perspective and there's relativity to it. So if they win the Champions League final, obviously that is amazing for them and their fan base. But so many of their games aren't them Champions League finals and aren't those big games, and they're actually probably not as enjoyable because the stakes aren't always there. I don't know what your view HS is because you obviously support a club that historically have been.
Yeah, I think fans are normally very unhappy when their team doesn't do well. I think there's a level of expectation amongst the bigger clubs. No matter, let me put it like this: Arsenal could field a team of semi-pros, and the fan base would still expect them to win every game. Basically, that's the level of expectation which is kind of unfair at some of the bigger clubs, and it kind of ruins football in a bit. I'm an Arsenal fan, but I actually don't like Arsenal fans that much. I'm one of those types of people, and I think that's because there's this element of how much certain games means to them is almost diluted because of the constant success, and when that goes, the demand for it can be almost unfair. I think that would be the comparison on the top six side of it. But it's hard to say, really. I think there's other clubs in the Prem as well. I think relegation is very sobering, obviously, which I'm fortunate enough not to have suffered as a fan. But I think your perspective changes a little bit then. But I wouldn't just say it's a top six as well. I would say there are a few other sides. I think all fans are entitled to some degree. That's kind of how I'd wrap it up.
Definitely, 100%. I mean, I would definitely put Newcastle United fans and West Ham fans, you could put in that bracket as well, but not going to cast too many aspersions. So moving on to Sunderland, to SAFC, to the topic of today's podcast. Connor, we touched on your background, so I won't go over it too much because we want to get into the meat of today's episode. But you did work for Sunderland. What was your role there, and what happened toward the end of that? Because it's obviously that was when we were owned by the mighty Stuart Donald and Charlie Methden and co.
Yeah. So my role at Sunderland was kind of initially was to look over the new and improved video and audio content with brilliant new equipment, which they never bought. So it kind of just morphed from being heading up a almost kind of internal fan media would probably be the best way of describing it. So kind of taking back, but kind of doing the content I was doing for Rogue Report, podcasts, videos, talking to fans outside the ground and whatnot. But very quickly it became obvious that that was not the case, and essentially I got sort of muddled into the old media man route, jack of all trades, does a match report and does the interviews after the game, which is fine. It was good experience, but it wasn't what I was really hired for. I was hired kind of to be creative and not mundane. And I think if you know anyone who's ever worked at a football club, it's a pretty mundane job. You're feeding out propaganda, essentially, happy news, everything's hunky dory, positive, even when you lose 5-0. And it's not really what I enjoy doing. I'm much better being creative, as I said before. So in terms of working with the owners at Sunderland, I think when I went in there was a lot of positivity around the owners. I know there's certain fan websites that don't, or claim that they weren't, necessarily fans of them from the beginning, but they all were. They all did interviews with them. Roker Report, Wise Men Say, I Love Supreme, all did interviews with the owners and interviews with the managers, and everything was kind of hunky dory until pretty much the moment I signed at Sunderland, which was in the February. That's when things started going downhill for the club on a PR perspective. I don't think it was related to me, but it was certainly linked. And it was obvious from when I was in there that it was a skeleton club, not much in the way of staff, not much in the way of resources. Academy was obviously brilliant in a lot of ways, but you could tell hadn't had money spent on it. I mean, I don't know if you know how good the Academy Light is, but it is an elite level training facility.
I played there a few times.
It is an excellent facility, but it's literally not. It felt to me like it hadn't had money spent on it in about 20 years, which was roughly when it opened. So the club was kind of like falling apart from the inside. The infrastructure was terrible. The management systems were terrible. There was one point where the club didn't have a managing director. We spent the 1920 season essentially without any sort of direction from above. It was kind of just do your own thing, and that seeps onto the players. We had Phil Parkinson in as well as a manager, and he was just nothing about him. Really, really bland. Man, I mean, nice enough bloke, but bland. Wouldn't say hello to you if you were walking down the corridor. Very much not what you'd expect from a football manager. And when Jack Ross was there, fair enough. I had my own run-ins with Jack Ross. I don't think he particularly liked me because of my background, and there was a few times where I think he was probably a bit too short with me, and it wasn't really my fault that I came from where I came from. But at least he had personality. At least he had ownership of the place. It's Phil Parkinson. The moment he walked into that football club, I was like, we all best start applying for different jobs, because there's absolutely no way that we're going to get promoted under this manager. He has got nothing about him. And it's a real eye-opener when you're working for Sunderland, which is a Premier League club in pretty much every single sense, and you hire a manager like that who's now managing in the conference. It's really, really poor. And I kind of went away from the initial conversations I had with Phil Parkinson thinking this bloke is not going to get Sunderland promoted through brilliance. It'll be luck if it happens. It just... In fact, to be honest, I'd be more worried right now if Sunderland did get promoted with him, because it would have had him in the Championship and it would have been embarrassing. So, yeah, I think I don't even know what the initial question was. I think I just ended up with a little bit of a tirade there, but that kind of sums up what I was doing at Sunderland.
Well, it was just basically asking about your time at SAFC. So you went through quite well, and there's a great insight. And it kind of like puts us at the point in the narrative that I want to pick up from, and like to give a bit of background to our listeners, because a lot of them might not be too versed in our recent history. You mentioned like the Stuart Donald era. A lot of people, doesn't matter who you are, I get a lot of people even at work and wherever that talks to me about Sunderland Till I Die, the series on Netflix. So many people will probably actually know who Jack Ross is, who Stuart Donald is, who Charlie Methven is, particularly from Twitter memes. I'm gutted for you, Connor, that you weren't in that room when you had the, that meme where it's, just like the video where he's just...
Do you know what it is? I'm gutted I wasn't in that meeting, because, I had a good relationship with Charlie Methven. I know he's got a lot of bad press and he deserves 99% of it. But on a personal level, I actually got along with him. Considering we're very different, he's essentially a posh Tory, and I am essentially, no, not a wheeler dealer. He's beyond wheeler dealer. He's a rich wheeler dealer. He's like next level. I am not that. I am a working class northern person who you can imagine is a left wing. You can see where the issues of conflict. But me and him would have arguments all the time. I remember once I was driving with him to Ashton, which is a small mining town in Northumberland, to support us do. And I remember him being shocked that they didn't sell cigars in the local off license.
No way.
And I was just saying, I was like, do you not know where you are? Like, you're in a working class Ashington town with high unemployment. They're not going to sell cigars at the local off license. Me and him, though, would have kind of arguments all the time. And going back to that Netflix clip you were talking about, one of the things I was always argue with him about is the entrance music, the music when they run out, and the music at the end. Because he changed them things, and my argument to him, and it still is now, is you wouldn't walk into Liverpool and take away You'll Never Walk Alone. So why are you coming in here and changing things because you personally don't like them when you have absolutely no idea the history and how it makes the people feel here? And I found it annoying watching that clip that nobody said that, because that was literally the conversation I had with him hundreds of times. Do you know when we got to Wembley and we played in the Checker Trade Trophy final? Me and Frankie, who's the current he's like commentator at Sunderland.
What, Frankie Francis?
Yeah. We'd I'd spoken to him beforehand. And I said, look, when we win, or if we win, play the song we play when we win, which is
I was about to mention that song. I don't know the name of it, but
Paint Your Wagon, or Paint My Wagon, I think it is. So I told him, and he did it, and then he got absolutely bollocked for it, because had we won, they would have played that song, and they didn't want that song to play anymore. That's how strongly I felt about that, though. So that Netflix scene there is something that is actually imprinted in my brain, that does my head in, that nobody said what I was thinking. But the other thing as well is that I was technically in the Netflix documentary, and I was talking to you before about this, but I was in for maybe 10 seconds. A couple of times I was in the background as well, but I was in for 10 seconds where it was on my face, like I was the main event. And Ryan Reynolds, he's bought Wrexham from that. He enjoyed that my face so much that he bought Wrexham Football Club. So Wrexham fans, you can thank me. Football fans, you can thank me for having Ryan Reynolds in the game, and clearly just liked us that much.
Yeah, Connor, I didn't realise your name and your face stretched as far as Hollywood, to be fair. So if I'd known that before, or a number of years ago or months ago, I would have had you on sooner. But
I'm just humble. Nobody knows, because I'm very humble.
So Sunderland were bought by Kyril Louis-Dreyfus. Or the takeover was completed, I think it was February this year. Lee Johnson came in December 2020. We actually, even though the new owners hadn't came in time for us to really build, or change the squad in too many ways. I know Carl Winchester came in, someone else came in, there's a couple of other players that did come in. We went on a bit of a run. Luke O'Nien was playing centre half for most of that time. We did fall short at the end. We kind of fell off a bit. Eventually got knocked out by Lincoln City. But then it was really at that summer point where we started to actually feel the effects of Louis-Dreyfus coming in, his promise of building from within, modernising the club. Christian Speakman, I know, was appointed well before that, the summer, as sporting director, alongside a number of other recruits at academy level and in the field of data and recruitment, which in my time I've been a Sunderland fan, I don't think I've ever seen the word data put in the same word as recruitment or any other recruitment kind of methodology other than just Steve Bruce has come in, he's going to sign some of his contacts. And then the transfer window started slowly. This is just me giving some context, by the way, for those listeners who don't know us too well. Transfer window started slowly, but then ended very successfully. We brought in a number of young players. Callum Doyle came on loan from Man City. Dennis Cirkin came in from Spurs on a permanent deal. Niall Huggins on a permanent deal from Leeds. Then we somehow signed Thorben Hoffman on loan from Bayern, and Leon Dejaku from Union Berlin. So very long-winded intro there. We're currently second. So Connor, what has impressed you most about the new ownership, and are there any concerns, if you have any, which I imagine no, based on your experiences with Donald and Co?
I don't have any concerns about ownership. I mean, I'll start there first. You go from having no structure and no infrastructure to now seemingly having structure and infrastructure. So even if the plan isn't right, which I do think the plan is right, but even if it is wrong, at least we've got a plan, and there hasn't been a plan for a long time. My main concern probably lies with the manager. I don't have an issue with Lee Johnson, and it's certainly not a Lee Johnson bashing that I'm aiming for. However, his career is riddled with streaks. You look at his whole time in management, and it's consistent with win 5, 6, 7 in a row, then you can lose 4 in a row. And there's times where they've been, I think they were top of the league at Christmas in 16, 17, or maybe in 17, 18, and they end up finishing 13th because the form was that bad, so inconsistent. And we saw it at the end of last season with Sunderland. We were brilliant, and then it got the last 8 games, and we basically lost them all. So that's a massive concern for me. I don't know if you can get promoted with that level of inconsistency. I do like what he's done with the team, and I do like the way that the team plays. There is a clear identity there, but that is a massive concern for me. In terms of the ownership changes, you mentioned talks about going towards data, and I know Moneyball is something that is often talked about in football, and you've seen that with Brentford is the most famous example. But Barnsley are also a team that's done that and have had success, even if they are struggling this season. If Sunderland ought to do that, that's kind of how you stand out. There's ways of getting out the league, well, the championship, which is ultimately Sunderland's goal. You can throw a lot of money at it and get lucky, like what Aston Villa did. Newcastle's done that in the past. West Brom this season are probably aiming for that. Bournemouth are probably aiming for that this season. Fulham are probably aiming for that this season. But that has risks, as you see with Derby, who just went to administration. You can't just throw money at it and hope for the best. Sheffield Wednesday are in our league right now by doing the same thing. So the way to do it for me is to be clever about what you spend. And you mentioned Hoffman, the goalie who we brought in, who we do have a chance to buy at the end of the season. We've got that agreed. Dejaku, which if it turns out again, we've got a chance to buy him. We've bought a lot of young players in this summer. Niall Huggins looks like a very tidy player when I've watched him play. Obviously, you've got the academy players as well. Dan Neil, who's looked absolutely excellent, and already people are saying he's going to be a big player. Dennis Sergens came in from Spurs, who, again, Spurs fans were surprised that they let him go. And from what I've seen so far, he's been excellent for Sunderland. You look across the team, and there's just been excellent additions across the park, in terms of age, the right age, but also players that have improved us. Ross Stewart actually came in the January, so technically was a signing from the old regime, but he is levels above any striker we've had at this level, including Charlie Wyke, who scored 30 plus goals last season. But Ross Stewart just has something special about him at this level. That's probably the best way of describing it. He can run channels. He's quick. He's very physical, very good in the air. He literally does everything you'd want from a League One striker. So I've been thoroughly impressed with him. But I think overall now you look at the Sunderland team, compared to the Sunderland team that Phil Parkinson was trying to build, and it's night and day. I mean, God, you look at players like Aidan O'Brien, who's still here right now, and you think that was the recruitment policy last season was players like him. And now you look at what we've brought in this year and you go, well, what would you rather have? I know I'd rather have these young players who are hungry and wanting to build a future rather than relying on, championship cast-offs. I remember we had Conor McLaughlin, who wasn't a bad player, but he certainly didn't move the needle forward. And there's often, when Sunderland's been in this league, we've brought in players that are decent footballers at this level, but they don't move the needle. They don't improve you really in any way. Since we've came down at this level to when this past summer happened, it was very rare we bought a player that really improved the team. This summer, I think you can see that they've improved the team, but they've also given the chance for the team to grow and improve together as a group. And now there's players that, when you watch Sheffield United, for example, a few years ago, come through the leagues. I think it took them 3 years. Got a League One, had 2 seasons in the Championship, were in the Premier League. They had players though that were with them through them levels. Sunderland had never had players though that I looked at and went, "Oh, I can see Aidan O'Brien with us in the Premier League." No, I couldn't see that happening. I couldn't see Tom Flanagan. I know he's playing for us now, but them players that were brought in the past, you couldn't see them growing with them. But now, if somebody said to me, Niall Huggins could be a Premier League player, I'll go, yeah, I can see that happening. Elliot Embleton, academy player, but I could see him in the Premier League. And I'm not saying the Premier League players now, I'm just saying long term, we have a squad full of players. I wouldn't be surprised if 5 or 6 were Premier League players with us if the trajectory worked. And Sunderland have not done that at this level. So that's the main thing I've been impressed with. There's clearly a plan to grow the squad as a group together and try and take us through the levels rather than just continually every summer trying to just throw things at the wall and hoping a couple of players stick and turn into diamonds.
Yeah, correct. I mean, because there's other approaches to it. I mean, approach we've had to date has normally been like, well, we'll sign players that are proven at League One level, or we'll sign players at Championship level. Even someone like Corey Evans, who came in on a free transfer from from Blackburn, Northern Irish international. Like, he's a good player, but he's typified a lot of players that we've brought in where, oh God, yeah, they've come from a championship club, they're a championship quality. Well, if they were championship quality, they'd be retained by a championship club. The fact they haven't means they're not, and there might be other issues like injuries, and they come down. There's often issues, or they're not as good as we think they are. But that new approach, as you said, it still takes cash, though, in a sense. I mean, the fact that it shouldn't be overlooked that we do have a little bit of cash now compared to what we had before. I mean, we've got an owner that is a billionaire, so I'll say a little bit of cash. For the league, it's a lot of money, but compared to half the championship and most, or if not all, the Premier League, it is still fairly modest. It's like Dennis Serkin, prime example, young player, £6 million buyback in his deal from Spurs. So there is, we do have to give up something when we sign some of these players. I think Bielsa with Huggins was very happy to let Huggins go because Bielsa is very much a purist and wanted Huggins to continue developing and he didn't have a path at Leeds. But as you say, yeah, it shows a desire to build at this level and to go up with the to take the team basically up the leagues as a collective. But do you think there's an issue that with a team that young, we could become unstuck and not potentially go the whole way? I mean, I was there, as I said, 4-0 loss to Pompey. That kind of reeked a bit of a team that either hasn't completely gelled together or are just quite inexperienced to manage that sort of occasion.
I would, to be honest, to me, that was tactical naivety from the manager. You see that pitch, you don't try and play football on it. You try and do what Portsmouth did and kind of go long and hope for bounces of the ball. I thought it was, I just thought the way that he lined the team up and the way he was trying to play was just silly. I just think when the conditions are that bad, you throw your plan out the window and you just kind of say, right, okay, this is going to be a battle and we're going to have to battle. You got Ross Stewart up front who can be a battering ram for you, utilize it. So I think that was more, hopefully Lee Johnson learned a lesson. It's all well and good having football philosophies, and it's one of the things that does my head in with football philosophies. And I remember Brendan Rodgers was like this with Swansea years ago. No matter what happened, they're stuck to the system of passing it around the back four and then passing it in the midfield and having lots of possession, irrespective of what the game was actually like. The top managers in football and the top teams change. I think about Mourinho's Chelsea back in the day. They were a team that if you went, right, we're going to pass, Mourinho will go, okay, we'll match you. We'll do that and we'll be better than you at it. If you want to play physical, oh, yeah, we can play physical. So we'll beat you at that as well. You want to play a counter-attack game? Well, we can do that better than you as well. And we can make sure that you kind of counter-attack with that. They're the good teams. The teams that just have a philosophy and stick to it no matter what. And I think at times even the top level managers have fallen sort of foul to this. I think Pep Guardiola sometimes loses games because he is so rigid about how he wants to play. And I just think to be a successful team, you need to be able to win in many different ways. And that is a concern for me that Portsmouth game was such a disaster because to lose 4-0 against a team that actually hasn't been playing very well simply because you were unwilling to change the way you played, that to me is kind of not good enough. In that's a flaw that needs to be worked out through the season, because you're not going to win every game 5-0 like we did against Cheltenham in the midweek and where you play nice football. It's just not realistic. It's not going to happen at this level. So you need to have different ways of winning, and that's something that they've got to figure out.
And that perhaps lends to your point earlier around the form book for Johnson over the years being so hit and miss, because perhaps when if he doesn't change the way he plays, they get, for example, now if we could potentially go on a bad run now because that was such a damning defeat. We could potentially go 2 or 3 games and it might not be so easy as it has been in recent weeks. I've been walking. I went to the Cheltenham game last Tuesday. Honest to God, I've never been to a game where we were so dominant in my entire life. Like, it was just outrageous. They had some players missing, and they have just come up from League Two. So, it potentially is the reason why. But as you say, that might be why. But what I do like about Johnson, there might be this form guide might go hit and miss. However, we came from Jack Ross and even under Parkinson where we drew so many games. So I don't think we should take defeat as being the end of the world, because for me, a draw at this level when we're playing 46 games and when the kind of the target for what points are going to get you promoted is actually so high, I'm actually okay with losing the odd game. The Burton game a few weeks ago, I'm okay with losing the odd game. It might be really hard to take, and fans hate losing games. Some fans take it so badly, but actually drawing a handful of games, I mean, you could play 10 games, you could be undefeated in 10, but if you're drawing 7 of them, how many points are you really collecting? So I think I'm fairly comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, that's at all levels. I mean, we've got an Arsenal fan here. They would say the same thing. You want to win football matches, don't you? You don't want to. Yeah, drawing games is almost the worst result because it's just you leave and you're basically where you're at when you went. So there is that. You do want to win. You got to be aiming to win probably 25 to 30 games to get promoted. So that means you can't afford to lose 10 games. Provided you do get that level of wins. And at the minute, Sunderland, the home form's excellent. Could the away form be an issue? Obviously, we've only actually won one away game this season, but we've only played 4. Such as the craziness of the fixed list. You don't want that to become an issue though. But however, if they can win 20 home games this season, then it leaves you with far less to do on the road.
Earlier, you touched on certain players being able, you can see the potential path of them being in the Premier League as time goes on. Hopefully, if Sunderland move up the leagues, would you say the same could be said for Johnson? So, is he the guy to actually guide? Forget the players that Sunderland have signed and the recruitment and the drive for youth. Would he be the guy? Do you think to actually? Could you see him being a Premier League manager, basically?
I've not really thought about it. If I'm being brutally honest right now, no, I'd probably say I couldn't see him as a Premier League manager. Um, I think though the one thing with Sunderland is that it's now a head coach, and you've seen with a lot of teams that they can kind of. I mean, Watford's an extreme example, and I wouldn't really want to be like them, but you can kind of with it when you have a philosophy of playing that's ingrained within the football club and the recruitment's done outside of the manager, you can kind of slot in coaches without it having as much of a damaging effect. The thing with Lee Johnson is I don't think he has a promotion under his belt. He's never had sustained success over a season, and I don't know how anybody could think that he could have 2 of them. If he's going to be a Premier League manager of Sunderland, he has to find 2 of them seasons in probably 4 years. But he hasn't done it yet. And he's had ample opportunity when he was at Bristol City. Bristol City always had a strong team. I would probably say no. I don't see him as a manager who can manage in the Premier League. I mean, that being said, if he did sustain it this season and did get Sunderland promoted, then maybe my perspective would change. But right now, I still see the inconsistencies in the way that Sunderland play, and I saw it at the end of last season that everything looked brilliant and they were going to get promoted. It was written, everyone said Sunderland were going to get promoted last season because of how well they were playing, and then they went to teams towards the bottom of the league and lost games. And until he can prove that he's not going to do that, then for me, he will never ever be a Premier League manager.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's hard to say. I mean, no one would have expected Chris Wilder to be a Premier League manager, and then look what happened. And probably would have said the same thing about him. But again, if he does take us up, and then
But Chris Wilder though had success. I think he had promotions under his belt when he went to Sheffield United. Like he had taken, I think, Northampton up. That's the thing for me is Johnson's never actually had any actual success in his career. And I say actual success. Obviously, it is still success to have Bristol City punching it at the top half of the championship. That is success, but he's never ever had, he's not got a promotion under his belt. That's the knock on him. And I think he has had chances to get promotions, and I think that's why I'm uneasy about Lee Johnson. Probably more uneasy than most Sunderland fans are. And it's not me saying that. I do hope it works out for him at Sunderland, and I don't see a reason why it won't. But the streaks just really, really worry me.
I mean, I just don't think I can ever get Phil Parkinson out of my head. So he'll always be.
Oh God, he's Jesus compared to Phil Parkinson. God.
So, Connor, I know we're running out of time. So there's one kind of theme I wanted to touch on just to finish. I mean, we've kind of touched on it because we've went through quite a lot. We haven't really touched on players individually for the club because a lot of our listeners probably don't necessarily need to know that. But for a club like Sunderland, our rivals have just been taken over by a multi-billion-pound enterprise/state. It seems that to be successful in the Premier League or in world football now, and when I say successful, I mean like at the top echelons, you have to be or have to have that sort of wealth. Leicester have arguably been a beacon of light for clubs like us, or even a club like Newcastle until very recently, or other clubs even in the Football League, that you can do it without masses and masses of fortune. They've obviously got owners that have money, Leicester. I'm not saying they don't, but they have done it in a smarter way. So do you think there is any hope for a club like Sunderland for becoming a decent Premier League team? When I say decent, I mean say to top 10. I know it's become more saturated, but top 10 Premier League club.
I think Leicester kind of give hope to every every football fan, not even Premier League, every single football fan knows that it did give you the hope that it is possible. I would say since that's happened, you can see in everything that the quote unquote big six are doing with their Super League breakaway and the way that they're trying to, they've tried to manipulate the qualification for Champions League. Whereby you get Champions League kind of on your own coefficient. I've seen that banded about. They've spent more money since that's happened. Manchester City brought in Pep Guardiola kind of as a retaliation to Leicester winning it. Liverpool, of course, have done brilliant with Jurgen Klopp, and now the gap seems so much bigger than what it was. And you've seen that Tottenham and Arsenal are prime examples of two clubs that were close to them. Arsenal finished second, I think, the year Leicester won the league. I think Tottenham finished second the year after that. They're miles away now. They literally couldn't be any further from winning the Premier League at the minute. Probably the furthest Arsenal have been in the whole history of being a Premier League club is right now. Maybe other than the mid-90s when they had managers like Bruce Rioch. But other than that, they've been consistently towards the top, and the gap's grown so much. And I do think now it's going to be far more difficult. Newcastle have obviously had this takeover, but the landscape has changed so much since Man City got their money and Chelsea got their money, because everyone has a billionaire owner now. Everyone has these rich owners that are willing to spend. Look at what Everton have done. Everton have spent fortunes, and they've had world-class managers. Carlo Ancelotti at Everton was massive. And I remember when they got him, I was like, oh, well, Everton mean business now. Where'd they finish last year? 13th? And then Ancelotti leaves and somehow gets the Real Madrid job. The reality is the money, the success doesn't necessarily come from money anymore. But if you were in that position like what the big clubs were, they've got such a monopoly on it now because they had money at the right time and have been able to invest at the right time, that they're so far ahead of everyone in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the finances that they get in the game, whereby even Newcastle now, who've got this Saudi takeover, are probably about £1.5 billion away from even getting close to competing with the big teams. And that is an obscene amount of money that they obviously cannot spend because of all the fair play rules that exist in football. So it's so difficult now to break through. And I think it is almost became a bit disheartening from where we were when Leicester won the league to have seen where the game has went now. And the hope for Sunderland is that you can do what Brentford's done. That has to be what the ideal is for every single club in the Football League now, is you look at what Brentford's done over the last 10 years and you go, right, they're a small club, traditionally a League One club. And now they're in the Premier League and they actually look competitive in the Premier League. That game against Liverpool the other week, they were brilliant. I saw them beat Wolves as well away from home. And they do look like a genuinely good team, and that's got to be the model that teams follow, and that's the hope for me. You look at what they've done and say, right, okay, we can mimic that success. That isn't unattainable to do what they've done. Smart recruitment, the way they've treated their under-23 squad, well, their B team, which they've got as well, is eye-opening and very, very refreshing as well. So that's what Sunderland's got to do. I mean, you sort of touched on Newcastle. Newcastle's going to be very interesting to watch because they're going to have to get so much right off the pitch to have any success, because Newcastle right now is essentially a skeleton club, in the sense I said that about Sunderland when I was there, but Newcastle's the same. For a Premier League club, they've got no infrastructure to any degree. They don't have directors of football. They don't have any, certainly their academy products, that haven't produced any top level academy products for years. I know they've got the Longstaff brothers in at the minute and Paul Dummett. But they're not top level. Yeah, they're not top level though. That's what I mean. They're players that play for them, but they're not England internationals, and they're nowhere near being it. So they're going to have to sort all them things out off the pitch, and that'll take years to change the identity of that football club. Because right now they lose academy prospects to Sunderland in League One. That's how bad their academy is and how bad their training ground is, and it'll take literally years for Newcastle to become one of them big clubs. And for their sake, you hope that they don't just throw money at it and hope for the best, because you've seen what Everton's done. It hasn't worked. They bought James Rodriguez, didn't work. They've bought Richarlison for £50 million. It hasn't worked. Look at so many. Yerry Mina is another one that comes up my head. Michael Keane, they spent a fortune on. The whole squad's littered with huge outlays that have produced relatively nothing and haven't improved the team compared to where they were when they finished fifth under Roberto Martinez about 7 years ago. it's so difficult. You know, you've got to do the off the field stuff, and I think that so many clubs are trying to do the shortcuts, and that goes at all levels. Sheffield Wednesday, League One now, they try to take shortcuts by just spending money and hope for the best. You know, Aston Villa got lucky when they did theirs, but had they not won that playoff final, probably in League One right now because they didn't have any money they could spend. They would have been in transfer embargoes. Derby County right now spent money, didn't have a plan, just thought, yeah, we'll buy the best players we possibly can. They're going to end up in League One. You know, points deductions, administration, might not even be a football club. Football clubs need to learn. They need to be smarter. That's the main thing I would say at the minute with football. Just be smarter.
No, I completely agree. And actually, your use of Brentford, I think, is really apt. Probably a better example than Leicester because they are so much further ahead than what we are. I remember going to Leicester against Sunderland when they were in the league. I don't know if we got relegated that season or the season after, but Vardy scored twice. I thought, dominated that game, but Vardy scored twice on the counter, and we got turned over. The Brentford analogy is also interesting because I feel like we're doing that with our first team now. They take good players from or release players from top academies and put them into their B team. We're almost doing that in our first team at the minute, so it's quite an interesting analogy to have. But yeah, thank you, Connor. I know you've got to rush away to a gourmet meal this evening.
Jack a potato with cheese, maybe beans if I'm feeling particularly lavish.
Cheese and beans, man.
Yeah.
You can't beat that, to be fair.
It's a standard. The missus is out this evening, so I was like, I will make jacket potato. It's not a frozen meal though, so there is that. I could have easily stuck in some fish fingers and chicken nuggets and hope for the best, but I didn't.
Yeah, jacket potato, cheese, beans, and the pizza cup all in one evening.
All in one evening.
Yeah, you really are a Hollywood star. But no, thank you so much for coming on, Connor, and that insight was brilliant. Particularly that bit on what the outlook's looking like for Sunderland. So yeah, thank you so much, and good luck with your future endeavours with the Daily Mirror, I must say.
Yeah, definitely not the Daily Mail.
But yeah, cheers, Connor, and hope you have a good evening, and yeah, good luck to you.